Can Nick Smith Jr. pass Scoot Henderson? Is Terrence Shannon Jr. this year's Ochai Agbagi? And what transfer will have the biggest impact on his team and find himself in the 2023 NBA Draft? And in this episode, I will answer your mailbag questions, so stay tuned. Good morning and happy Monday. Shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I am your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board and the founder of NBA Draft Junkies.com. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That is prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Well, I hope everybody had a great weekend. I just came back from my college's homecoming. I went to Jackson State University. I don't know if you can see it on the YouTube. I know you definitely can't see it on the podcast, but it was a great experience. I usually go to homecoming, or at least I did I had like a 10-year consecutive streak. It's probably longer than that. And I hadn't been since like 2015 because I had been traveling abroad. So this is like my first time in the country around this time of year. So I had a very, very good experience. We had, a lot of attention on Jackson State this year. I know this is a basketball podcast, but Deion Sanders has definitely brought much needed publicity to Jackson State and just HBCUs in general. We had Good Morning America there. Snoop Dogg was there. Rick Ross. Quite a few other people were there. So I'm just glad to see that my alma mater is getting some much needed love. Had a chance to talk to a good friend of mine, Mo Williams, who was an NBA All-Star. A lot of people know Mo from his time playing with LeBron and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he is the basketball coach at Jackson State. And so I'm looking for big things from Mo and Jackson State on the basketball side this year. And they actually have some pretty good games on their schedule. I mean, they're probably not going to win those games, but it's some games that I'll be paying attention to just from, the aspect that it is my alma mater, and then they'll play some bigger schools that have some NBA prospects. So I'll be looking forward to that. Now, this episode, like I mentioned in the opening, I'm answering your questions. I have been receiving a lot of questions lately. A lot of questions, like tons and tons of questions. And actually, to be honest with you, I'd say probably 50% of the questions that I have been receiving have pretty much been about making a career in scouting and creating content. And I think maybe one day I'll find a way to address that and answer some of the questions. On one hand, I don't feel like I've completely made it, but on the other hand, I guess you can say I'm at the top of the bottom, if that makes sense. I mean, of course, you got your draft guys at the very top that have hundreds of thousands of followers and so on, and then I think I'm a couple tiers below them right now as far as popularity. But as far as just being able to monetize draft content, I'm definitely open to helping people answer those questions and as far as just how to get started. But I'll cover that on another episode. But in today's episode, like I said, this is a mailbox episode. I'm going to answer questions. And the first question that I want to answer is, can Nick Smith bypass Scoot Henderson? So I guess the person has already marked Victor Wembanyama as the top pick in the 2023 draft, has him solidified as the number one pick in Magic Marker, and it's almost a done deal. And so a lot of people think that the second pick is pretty much locked up too with Scoot Henderson. But this question is, can Nick Smith bypass Scoot Henderson? And I think Nick is in a tier of guys that are competing for the third spot. I think Scoot is pretty much a shoo-in to be the second pick. Some may feel like if Nick played for the Ignite, he would have big numbers. Some feel like if Scoot played in college, he definitely dominate. Just as far as my personal opinion, I think that I would go with Scoot just because Scoot is just a phenomenal athlete. And I have mentioned it before in different podcasts. You normally don't see guys at his age with that type of athleticism that have his type of pace to his game. His game is not totally built off of being athletic, and he has just this great ability to switch speeds and And, I mean, even though it was just one game, it was a showcase game, I thought he showed major improvement as a passer. He had 9 assists in the showcase against Wembanyama. And then he showed a much improved three-point shooting stroke. I think as far as like three-point shooting numbers last year, they were low. And I just chalk it up to just having to adjust from the high school line to the NBA three-point line. I mean, most people go from high school to the college line, but he had to adjust from the high school to the NBA three-point line. He was a really good mid-range shooter. He's one of the best mid-range shooters in the G League last year, which is pretty much close to the high school line. So I think once he extends his range, he's going to be a pretty good shooter. As far as Nick Smith, there's some things that I like about Nick. Then there's some things that I'm a little concerned about. I've seen some people list him as like an elite athlete, and he's also someone whose game is not necessarily dependent on his athleticism. But with my own eyes, I don't see elite athleticism, right? I don't see him as the same tier athlete as a Scoot Henderson. If I had one knock on Nick, is that he just doesn't get to the rim enough for me. He relies heavily on contested pull-up jumpers and floaters. I would like to see him personally get to the basket a little bit more. Maybe it's just the film that I've watched, but I feel like I've watched a pretty extensive amount of film. And maybe he'll show more at Arkansas. Maybe even if he doesn't show it at Arkansas, he may be able to show it in the NBA where there's a lot more floor spacing. But that would be my concern about Nick. I think Scoot has a more defined position as a point guard, while Nick is a combo guard. And just depending on how you look at that, you may look at that as an advantage towards Nick because he can play both positions. But I think with Scoot, I think he's, like I said, he has more so of a defined role. And that's why I think that it's going to be tough for Nick Smith Jr. to pass Scoot Henderson. But Nick could end up being the third pick. I think there's a range of guys from Cam Whitmore to Derek Whitehead. Some say Keontae George. There's quite a few guys that are in that range for the third spot. Definitely can't forget about the Thompson twins and Overtime Elite. So that answers my question. No, I don't think that Nick can bypass Scoot Henderson. But that's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. All right, the next question is, who is the top transfer in college basketball? And you know, college basketball is a whole lot different than it was when I was growing up. Transfers had to sit out a year. Now you can transfer. And some guys are on their third school, and they've been able to transfer to 3 different schools without having to sit out. Some of the names that come to mind as far as impact transfers, you got Kendrick Davis going to Memphis. You got Kevin McCullough Jr. at Kansas. You got Pete Nance going from Northwestern to North Carolina. My sleeper pick is Antonio Reeves at Kentucky. He had a great summer. He averaged 20 points and about 3 assists last season before transferring. I think he was at Illinois State. And he's been a scorer, and he's a senior, and I think that he could have like the biggest impact as far as on his team. And I also think that with a strong year that he could put himself in position to be a second-round pick, maybe even late first-round pick. It is going to be a bump up in competition, but I think with college basketball on one hand, you want to say it's getting younger, but then on the other hand, it's probably a little older because the whole COVID year has some guys playing at like 24 and 25 years old. But I think he could have the biggest impact outside of Kevin McCullough Jr. And I've talked about McCullough Jr. I think he's going to be the transfer that has the most impact at Kansas. It'll be interesting to see if he gets to play a lot of minutes at point guard. I know Kansas has a point guard already, but if he sees some time at point guard, and the biggest concern for Kevin is just, one, being healthy. I thought he was potential to get drafted in the second round this year's draft. He pulled out due to an ankle injury. But I do think that if he can shoot 36% from 3 with his defensive ability and his size and you know, the role as a connector and able to be like a ball handler, I think that he could be someone that could sneak in the first round. But I think it's going to be totally dependent on how well he shoots from 3. All right, the next question is, speaking of transfers, thoughts on Dawson Garcia. I think he's an NBA center. That's the question. Garcia he has size. He's someone that you could think would be your could have a pick and pop role in the NBA. Good positional size at 6'11", has a strong frame. He is agile. He's coordinated. He shot 36% from three over 43 games in his career, 105 attempts. Now, this will be his third school in 3 years. Was a freshman at Marquette. I think he was like all Big East. And then he was at North Carolina last year. Had an okay start, and then he ended up leaving. I think he had some family obligations that he wanted to move closer to home. And now he's back at home at Minnesota. As far as him being an NBA center, yes, I get it as far as like the shooting. Getting 36% from three is good, especially at 6'11". But my question is, what does he do outside of that? Like if the jumper's not falling, which again, maybe a little nitpicking here. If the jumper's not falling, I don't necessarily know what he does on an NBA level. He's not like a great rim protector. He's a below the rim finisher. And during the short time he played at North Carolina, he struggled. Only shot 45% at the rim. He missed 51% of his layups, and he just was inefficient in the low post. Now, again, I know that's not his role in the NBA. It won't be his role, but still at 6'11", he only shot 3 for 15 on post-ups at North Carolina. And I know the numbers at Marquette were a little bit better, but he still shot. He wasn't the most efficient. So I think if he can shoot maybe 38 to 40-something% from three and then add a little bit more of a game around the basket and maybe as a roller, then I think that he could definitely put himself in position to be a second-round pick. But that's just my opinions on Dawson Garcia. I do think that he has the size and he has a defined NBA role, but I think he needs to be a little bit better as a shooter. And the touch is there. There's no question his touch. He's almost 80% shooter from the foul line. But I would like to see him add a little bit more stuff to his game around the basket, be a little bit more efficient. And if he can show that he can block shots, then I think that he has a chance. All right, when we return, I'll answer a few more questions, but I want to talk to you about Prize Kicks, Prize Picks. I almost said Prize. I said Prize Kicks because there is a sneaker store around the corner from my house called Prize Kicks, and I always see their ads. But I want to talk to you about Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. Just pick 2 to 5 players, and they will go score more or less than the Prize Picks projection. So you're not competing against people. It's just you versus the projections available, and Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch, whether it's NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer. They even have esports, tennis, MMA, boxing. If it's a sport, more than likely they have it. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. It is safe, and there are fast withdrawals. And currently, it is operational in over 30 states and the entire country of Canada. So download the PrizePicks apps or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. Once again, thank you for making Locked On NBA Big Boy your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, check out the Game to Game podcast. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. So follow Game to Game on the Locked On Network, and it is available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, thanks again, like I said, for making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, and in this episode, we're just going through some of my DMs or the messages that I have been receiving about questions regarding the 2023 NBA Draft and just college basketball in general. All right, the next question is Alex Fudge. Is Alex Fudge a first-rounder? Alex Fudge is a defensive star. Best word I can think of. Offensively, he's a major work in progress. Made a name for himself at LSU last year for his defensive numbers as far as like his block and steal rate. I think that the numbers that he posted were like the best since Matisse Thybulle at Washington a few years back. Offensively, he's, like I said, a work in progress. He'll be at Florida this year. And the key for him is just showing, did he add a little bit to his offensive game? His calling card in the NBA, his defined role in the NBA is going to be as a defensive stopper. The question is, especially in today's NBA, can he provide something on offense? Because no matter how great of a job he does on defense, if he's a liability and this team is playing 4-on-5 on offense, then it's going to be tough for him to see minutes, especially in the playoffs where scoring counts. And so this year, as a sophomore, he has to show he has something to his game, has to show that he can just be an asset on the offensive end of the floor. Now, he is a terrific wing shot blocker, and he just stuffs the stat sheet on defense, whether it's steals, blocks. He's a hustle player, brings energy. There's no questions about the defense. Maybe he may need to get a little bit stronger and bulk up, but he's an excellent rebounder. He's a good athlete. He rebounds out of his area, which is something that I really like for guards and wings, and he crashes the offensive glass. Now, as far as like the areas of concern, now the ball handling it needs to improve tremendously. He has a very bad tendency of picking up his dribble, doesn't really have an identity on offense. He's a very reluctant shooter, and which is something this is weird to me, that defensively you credit him for his hands. He has quick hands. He gets his hands on everything from steals to blocks. But I feel like offensively, when it comes to like catching, I don't think he has like the best hands. I see him bobble passes. He is turnover prone. He doesn't have much touch around the rim, which again I think is related to his hands. I think just like his overall feel and basketball IQ is behind, and his shooting splits were bad. 42, 28, 56% shooting splits. So 56% from the foul line. So again, I think this all goes into his hands. I think he just lacks touch as a shooter, as a finisher, and I think that's going to have a major impact on what he can do on the offensive end of the floor. And then as far as like the passing and decision making, he only had 8 assists compared to 27 turnovers as a freshman. So to answer your question, the question was, is Alex Fudge a first rounder? If he can just be average on offense and continue to just dominate defensively, I think he has a chance. But it's an uphill battle for him to have enough offense to get into the first round and what I consider a deep class. All right, the next question is, will this be a breakout season for Damian Collins? That's a good question. You would hope so. There was some talk about Damian Collins being a first-round pick coming into last season. They thought he was going to be a one-and-done guy. And, like last year, going into his freshman season, I was not high on Damian Collins. I saw the athletic ability. I saw the physical the physical tools, but I felt like he lacked an identity. I thought that he settled for too many jumpers. I thought he tried to play too much like a wing. I didn't see him do much around the basket, and you can go listen to like past episodes from about a year ago. I wondered what was his role going to be at Kentucky? Was Kyle going to make him score around the basket? And he didn't really play a lot as a freshman. He didn't have the impact that I thought he would. But overall, he still has tremendous upside and potential. And even though I feel like he played too much in the perimeter in high school and wanted to be a wing so bad, he does have enough of those wing skills that I think you can build up on. And if you turn him into like this athletic roll man vertical lob threat that can make some plays off the dribble or shoot or pull up, then you have a pretty decent offensive weapon there. But right now it's just a matter of him finding an identity. I think that his athleticism definitely translates. He does play hard. He can draw fouls with his activity. He's a vertical lob threat. He's definitely a lot more skilled than he was able to show last year. But my concerns are the frame is a little thin. He's still raw. The shot selection, at least not last year, not as bad as it was like when I saw him in the prep level. But the shot selection can be a little bit spotty. The shot needs to be consistent. He's an inconsistent shooter when he does shoot the ball. And then I just wonder about his touch. But overall, I just think that if he can just again showcase the athleticism, maybe add a little bit of face-up game, and showcase some of the wing skills that he does have, then there is a chance that he could see his name, on first round, on like mock drafts as a first round pick, which is something that he was at this time last year. So as far as him being having a breakout season, I definitely think that he is a candidate to have a breakout season with another year of college basketball under his belt. All right, last question in this segment. Will Terrence Shannon Jr. be this year's Ochai Agbagi? And that is a very, very, very good question, because Terrence Shannon Jr. seems like he's been on NBA radars forever. I know after his freshman year, I had a breakdown video on him on NBA Draft Junkies on my YouTube channel. And it seems like he's done what he's supposed to do to get better, but it just seems like he's basically taking the Agbagi route, deciding to develop in the NBA as opposed to just developing in college. Coming into his sophomore year after his freshman year where he showed the flashes and potential, the concern was about his shooting. Can he shoot? Can he shoot? Can he shoot? Can he shoot? That was something that you always heard because he was such a reluctant shooter as a freshman. He rarely took shots. But overall, he's improved as a shooter. Now, as far as like what his role is in the NBA, that is like the question. He's like this 6'6", he has the positional size. He's a bouncy athlete, long arms. He's left-handed, has a good first step. He's fast in the open floor. He does play hard. But it's like his role has changed so much as a freshman. Like when he was a freshman, he was like this energy guy that kind of played hustle points, was an active cutter, and just did all the dirty work. He was very much a blue-collar player. But over time, as he developed more of a shooter, he took a lot more threes, and he became somewhat of like a straight-line downhill slasher. And he's a solid ball mover and passer, but it's just kind of interesting to see how much his role has changed. Now, the concerns about him are, does the shooting translate as far as the consistency? And offensively, doesn't really have a lot of creativity off the dribble. It's just kind of straight line drives where he can use his athleticism to blow by guys and kind of finish at the rim. He does need to work on going right. He's very left-hand dominant. When he's going to his right, he's nowhere near as explosive. I think he needs to add like a soft touch finish package around the rim. He doesn't really have like a lot of different floaters or just creativity around the rim. Now, as far as finishing around the basket, I know the numbers aren't great, but I will put it into context that Texas Tech did not have very much floor spacing. It was like playing in the phone booth. I mean, college basketball already is a game where the lane is congested, and at Texas Tech, where they didn't have a lot of shooters, it was even more difficult to get around the basket or finish around the basket. So him and Kevin McCullough are two of the transfers from Texas Tech that have left that I'm looking forward to seeing if their numbers were impacted by Texas Tech's lack of spacing and just they had a very basic old school offense. Now I've heard that they've made some incredible changes to the offense this year. I heard they hired like this genius coach from the JUCO ranks that is just a offensive genius, I should say. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Texas Tech plays. But as far as him being Ochai Agbagi, if he shoots 40% from three like Agbagi did and showcases the athleticism that we already know that he has, then there is a chance. But it's just kind of weird. Agbagi had such a great year at Kansas, ends up being a lottery pick. And now he's out of the rotation as a rookie on a team that was supposed to be like the favorite to challenge for the number one pick because they just totally decimated their roster. But as of right now, Utah is undefeated, and Agbagi is out of the rotation as a lottery pick, which I think is very interesting. All right, when we return, I have a few more questions, but I want to talk to you about Bet Online because Bet Online is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new college basketball season coming up. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It is the fastest and the easiest way to check in on your favorite games, events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, once again, it's Rafael Barlowe NBA Draft Junkies, Director Scouting, NBA Big Board. All right, the next question is, what is your opinion on Eric Gaines? Eric Gaines is one of the players that left LSU. They had a pretty much mass exodus after, all the issues surrounding their coach. Gaines is transferring to UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham. And Eric Gaines has a lot of the stuff that I like in a guard. He has the offensive creativity, he has the shake and bake, he can get his own shot. But he's only 150 pounds. Maybe 160. It's going to be very, very difficult to play in the NBA at 150 pounds. I think that is the biggest concern for Gaines. Talent-wise, he's there. I mean, he's lightning quick. He's a blur in the open floor. Like I said, he can create his own shot, shifty ball handler. Defensively, he's pesky. He gets 2 steals per game. He's a good free throw shooter. Despite being a $150, he's a very good rebounder. Has the toughness, soft touch floater package. He has a lot of things I like I said. But again, 150 pounds, definitely has to get stronger. Struggles finishing through contact, which obviously is related to his weight. Only shot 51% at the rim. I would like to see that a little bit higher. And he's just inefficient from the floor. 39% from the floor overall, 25% from 3. Even though he's a good free throw shooter, but still 39-25 shooting splits aren't going to really help your case for the NBA. I do think he has to show improved decision making this year. For his career, he only has 5 more assists and turnovers, which is 135 assists and 130 turnovers in 63 games. I think he does have a tendency to hunt highlights, and maybe that's just his game. Maybe he's just flashy and he just kind of has that swagger about him, but he does have a tendency, at least in my opinion, to hunt highlights, and he can play a little bit too fast and out of control. But the jumper, he has to improve the jump shot, because if you're a $150, you're not going to be able to live in the paint in the NBA. Despite the spacing, you have to be able to knock down jumpers, and he only shot 26% on jump shots. So I think that he has the tools, he has the potential to be an NBA player, but there's a couple things that I think that he really needs to improve on, which the hardest part is going to be adding weight, because he's going to play against guards that are 40 pounds heavier than him, and that's at the minimum. We're not even talking about like your James Hardens, and even your guys like Steph Curry, Dame Lillard. Those guys may not look big, but they're a lot stronger with stronger cores, and they'll be able to just kind of like run through him like the tape at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. All right, who is your player that you really like and are higher on than the consensus? So last year, and maybe like the last few years, I've kind of like fell in love with these second-round picks, these big ball handlers and ball movers that show point guard skills and that can defend up at other position. So a couple years ago, it was Delano Banton. And then last year, I liked Jordan Hall. And this year, it is Andre Jackson. Andre Jackson is a 6'6" big guard. He has good feel as a passer. I think he has advanced court vision. He makes live dribble reads. He processes quickly. He's unselfish, maybe to a fault. And I just love the touch and the timing that he puts on his passes. Like, he can put the passes on the money. He's a natural playmaker. He rebounds. He's the guy that can turn a rebound into a fast break. He's a threat in transition as a passer and as a finisher. He's a good athlete. He's smooth. He's fluid. Not like super like vertically explosive, but again, he's, like I said, he's smooth. He's fluid. He's fast on the open floor. Has a nice floater. Shot a respectable 36% from 3 on a decent amount of attempts. Positive assist to turnover ratio. And he's trending in the right direction. So that's why I'm high on Andre Jackson. Now, the concerns are he has like a very, very funky release on his jumper. And even though he shoots floaters from deep, like I haven't really seen anybody shoot floaters from as deep as he's shooting them since like Juan Carlos Navarro. But he shoots floaters from deep. And I think the reason why he shoots floaters is from so far out, because he's probably more comfortable shooting a floater or a runner than like a pull-up jumper, because his release is just really, really weird. And despite the fact that he is efficient shooting mid-range jumpers on a low volume of attempts, I don't think it's something that he'll be able to do as far as like as a pick-and-roll ball handler. If the defense goes under the screen that he'll be able to pull up because his release, like I said, is so funky. But he only shot 31.9% on jumpers. I think that's the area for improvement. And he's inefficient in transition despite the tools. But that is because he likes to pull up for three in transition. Only shot 31% on catch and shoot jumpers. And the biggest question or concern is that he can be too unselfish to a fault. But I don't know if that will necessarily impact him too much because I think in the NBA, his role will be as like a connector instead of like a go-to scorer. All right, 2 more questions. All right, you've spent time in Turkey. What are your thoughts on Adem Bona? This is your first round pick. Adem Bona is from Turkey. He played basketball, college or high school basketball at Prolific Prep. He's going to UCLA. Phenomenal athlete, vertical athlete, very bouncy, energetic, can play a role as a roll man, as a rim runner, vertical lob threat, shot blocker. Has a lot of tools that you like in a modern big. But my biggest knock on Bona is that he's still raw offensively, but he falls on the floor way too much for me. And I tweeted a few days ago, like, I'm going to keep track of how many times Joel Embiid falls on the ground during the game. And, it's weird because I did listen to the game where they say Embiid falls, and some of it is to protect himself, so some of it's on purpose. And I understand that. But it's like he's not playing above the rim. I could see if he was playing above the rim, but it just seems like he's always falling over. And then sometimes when he's falling over to prevent himself from getting hurt, it allows the team to have advantages on the other end because he's picking himself up on the ground. Now, Bona is similar to Embiid. They're totally different skill set wise, body type. But Bona's just always on the ground. When I watch his film, I can count at least every game that he's on the ground 5 to 7 times. And sometimes him driving or even like trying to tip a shot in, a little bit of contact, falls on the ground, and it leads to a transition fast break for the other team. So I do think that he does have first-round potential based off of his athleticism and physical tools and just the energy that he brings. Doesn't need to have the ball in his hands to have an impact. But I just want to see how often he falls on the ground this year. Hopefully it's a lot less than what it was when he was at Prolific Prep because I felt like he was on the ground all the time. All right, last question is, why didn't Brandon Huntley Hatfield play more at Tennessee? And that is a question I asked myself a lot last year. And I don't know how to say this, right? I guess I'm supposed to be a draft analyst or draft expert. But I do not have a feel on Huntley Hatfield. And I had to ask different coaches that have coached against him and different people that knew him, is he athletic? Because when I watch his film, there are times where he looks like he is a really good athlete. I mean, he has a big body, positional size, but there are times where he'll have the ball in the post and he'll do a jab step and you see like the fluidity in the hips, and then he'll make an athletic play and you're just like, okay, this guy is a skilled low post scorer. That's a good athlete. And then there are times where you look and you say, like, he's not athletic at all. Starting with his run. The way he runs down the floor, it's not like this smooth glide where you project him to be like a rim runner. And then just his overall movements are consistent. Like, I'm really struggling to figure out, is he athletic or not? It's just very weird because, again, he makes these wild plays. There was a play against Kentucky, I believe, where he caught the ball at the free throw line, pump fake, took one dribble, and just kind of like hammered in a powerful dunk. And then there's times where, you just see his movements and you're like, okay, he is your below the rim center. Maybe Al Jefferson below the rim type center. Not saying that he's as skilled as Al Jefferson, but it's weird because, when I look at his body, I like, okay, he's stiff in the hips, but then sometimes he'll do like a jab step and spin. It's very, very weird. My knocks on him, actually, I'll go into the positives first. He has an old school low post NBA game. He's skilled around the block. Does show some flashes of having a soft touch. Has a nice baby hook. Has a nice feel as a low post scorer. And again, he's just your skilled interior presence with a throwback game. If he was born 20 years prior or was in a draft 20 years prior, then I think he's a lock to be a first round pick. Now, I don't even know if he gets drafted just based off of his game as someone that needs low post touches that's not really athletic. And then, like I said, he makes occasional wild plays on offense. I think his best skill set is a passer. He does show like very good feel as a passer. Does show some passing instincts. But I just can't get a hand, can't put my finger on it. So I'm going to be paying close attention to him this year. But here are my concerns why I think that he could be this guy that ends up being like a 4-year college player or maybe even does not get drafted in the NBA. He's stiff in the hips, not the most agile. He's not a good rebounder. Like if he gets a rebound, it's because the ball came to him. He doesn't rebound out of his area. Just doesn't have like the natural rebounding instincts that you would want for a big. I mean, he just kind of rebounds based off of his size. I think he struggles with length around the rim. He doesn't have a lot of vertical pop. I think he needs to get stronger despite having the looks of a strong frame. He's just kind of easily pushed around in a sense. Doesn't have a mean streak. I would love to see him have a mean streak. Kind of has the gentle giant vibes. Doesn't fight for low post position. I think that kind of goes into like his mean streak. And one of my biggest pet peeves about bigs is bigs that load up. So, if you throw him a pass, I think I'll get to his hands in a second, but if you throw him a pass, he kind of likes to squat down and power up, and then usually that leads to fouls. I would love to see guys do just the Pau Gasol. Pau Gasol always kept the ball high. It never went. It was like the Mikan drill. And I think that, a lot of bigs need to really work on the Mikan drill. And if they're not working on it, if they are working on it, just implement it into their game. I don't think that he'll be able to defend in space. He's a poor free throw shooter, but he has small hands. And you can tell he has small hands. He even bobbles passes. Not only are they small, but I think his hands are weak. Shoots a knuckleball shot. Doesn't have like a long wingspan. I mean, just a lot of questions and concerns. And that is probably the reason why he did not play a lot at Tennessee. But maybe at Louisville, he can turn the corner. Another thing that I want to pay attention to is just his weight, how much his weight fluctuates during the season, because I do think that he has the body type to where he can put on weight fast. But overall, he's talented. He was someone that I honestly thought was going to be a first-round pick coming into the draft or coming into last college basketball season. And so maybe Tennessee just wasn't a good fit for him. Maybe he just needed a change of scenery. I mean, we've seen it happen before from Austin Reeves to Alondes Williams to where guys were just able to be a totally different person on a new team. Well, that wraps up this episode. So thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board your first listen of the day. Now for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It is available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Once again, I'm Rafael Barlowe. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Stay tuned for the great content we have coming to you this week, because as of today, we are now just 14 days away from the start of college basketball. So looking forward to it. All right, I will see you tomorrow, or you will hear me tomorrow. Hopefully everyone has a good day, and I am